The streets of Tel Aviv carry a tense calm tonight. In the heart of Israel's largest city, the faces of missing hostages stare back from banners and posters. One of them is Inbar Heiman. Her image, printed beside the words, "I'm also a woman, bring me back as well," has become a silent plea that thousands of Israelis walk past every day. It is a reminder that the conflict is not only about politics or strategy, but about families who are waiting and lives that hang in the balance. In recent days, hope has cautiously returned to Israel. The militant group Hamas, which continues to hold dozens of Israeli hostages inside the Gaza Strip, has promised to release at least some of them. That promise, reported by international media, has been greeted with relief across Israel, but also with skepticism. Many here say they have heard such commitments before, only to see them unravel at the last minute. Among those speaking out is Zvika Elazari, a middle-aged civil servant who has lived through decades of regional conflict. Standing near a busy intersection in Tel Aviv, he tells a television crew, "In my opinion, Hamas is at its lowest point. And because of that, I am convinced that in the end the deal will go through. Wars should not drag on for so many years." His words echo the fatigue that many Israelis feel after repeated cycles of fighting and ceasefires, but that sense of hope is tempered by fear. Dana Mishkin, who works in the country's high-tech industry, shakes her head as she speaks. The Hamas leadership has made promises many times, she says, but when it comes to the details, they start adding conditions and reservations. "I fear this will happen again, that everything will collapse and start all over again, and we won't hear anything for another 6 months. I don't know if our hostages even have another 6 months. We've seen their terrible condition, and I am very, very scared." Her voice breaks as she talks about the suffering of those being held in Gaza. On a nearby street corner, people gather in small groups. Some hold signs demanding that the government do more to secure the captives' release. Others simply sit in silence, watching the news updates on their phones. There is a shared feeling here that time is running out, that the physical and psychological toll on the hostages may already be too great. Moran Bloom, a social worker who has been counselling some of the hostages' families, adds another perspective. "It's possible Hamas is playing with us and with Trump," she says, referring to former US President Donald Trump's unexpected involvement in mediation efforts. "But we do have Trump's involvement, and he already managed to bring back some American citizens. With all his eccentricities, sometimes he does get what he wants. I truly hope he will get it now. I don't care if it's for a Nobel Prize or any other prize. I just want the hostages to be home." Blum's words highlight an unusual twist in this long-running conflict. Trump, no longer in office but still an influential figure on the global stage, has stepped into the negotiations as a kind of informal broker. His allies say he has been pushing behind the scenes to secure a breakthrough, driven by a mix of political ambition and personal conviction. For many Israelis, his involvement brings a glimmer of hope, though others remain wary, recalling the unpredictable nature of his past diplomacy. "In my opinion, Hamas is at its lowest point, and because of that, I am convinced that in the end, the deal will go through. Wars should not drag on for so many years." The scene in Tel Aviv reflects this complex blend of hope, fear, and political calculation. In one public square, a fountain becomes a meeting place for families who have loved ones trapped in Gaza. They sit on benches, clutching photographs of sons and daughters, waiting for news that never seems to come quickly enough. A few meters away, life goes on as usual. Children chase pigeons, friends gather outside cafes, and tourists take pictures. The contrast is striking, a reminder that in this conflict, the lines between everyday life and the trauma of war often blur. For Israelis, the question is not only whether Hamas can be trusted, but whether their own leaders can navigate the diplomatic and military pressures to end this ordeal. Prime ministerial officials have stressed that any deal must guarantee the safety of the released hostages and prevent further kidnappings. Security chiefs warn that Hamas may use negotiations to regroup or rearm. Critics argue that years of hardline policy have failed to prevent such crises and that only a broader political solution can bring lasting peace. On the other side of the border, Hamas faces its own challenges. Intelligence reports suggest that the group is under growing pressure from within Gaza, where conditions have deteriorated under blockade and sporadic fighting. Some analysts believe that this weakness is why Hamas is now willing to discuss a hostage release, hoping to gain some relief or international legitimacy in return. But others see the move as a tactical ploy designed to buy time. Internationally, the situation has drawn intense attention. The United States, still Israel's most important ally, has been involved in back-channel talks, with officials publicly insisting that any progress will depend on Hamas proving it can deliver on its promises. European governments, too, have expressed cautious support for a negotiated deal, while urging both sides to avoid steps that could trigger a new round of violence. Across the region, countries such as Egypt and Qatar have quietly played a role as mediators. For ordinary Israelis, however, these geopolitical manoeuvres are far removed from the daily anguish of waiting. Many remember earlier moments when the return of hostages was delayed or derailed by last-minute demands. Each new statement from Hamas is scrutinized for signs of sincerity or duplicity. Each rumor about a possible prisoner swap sends families into a new cycle of hope and despair. Walking through the streets of Tel Aviv, one can sense that the conflict is as much psychological as it is military. There is anger at Hamas for the abductions, frustration with the government for not bringing everyone home sooner, and a lingering fear that even a successful deal will be only a temporary respite before the next crisis erupts. Yet there is also resilience, a determination not to give up on those who are still missing. Journalists covering the story note that public opinion in Israel has shifted in subtle ways. While many once supported uncompromising military responses to hostage-taking, there is now a growing chorus urging diplomacy, even if it means negotiating with sworn enemies. Some commentators link this change to the visible suffering of the hostages' families, whose appeals have struck a chord with a nation weary of endless conflict. But I am afraid, because we have already seen Hamas give some sort of positive answer to the media, for example, saying yes, but then in the fine print they add but, with conditions and reservations. And I'm afraid this will happen again, that it will all collapse once more and start over, and we won't hear anything for another 6 months. I don't know if our hostages even have another 6 months. We've seen their terrible condition, and I am very, very scared. It's possible Hamas is playing with us and with Trump, but we do have Trump's involvement, and he already managed to bring back some American citizens. And with all his eccentricities, sometimes he does get what he wants. I truly hope he will get it now. I don't care if it's for a Nobel Prize or any other prize. I just want the hostages to be home. The presence of Donald Trump in this narrative adds another layer of drama. His supporters argue that his unconventional style and willingness to bypass traditional diplomatic channels give him a unique advantage in pressing both sides toward a deal. His detractors warn that his involvement could complicate delicate talks, turning a humanitarian issue into a political spectacle. For the families waiting by their phones, these debates are almost irrelevant. They say they will welcome anyone who can bring their loved ones home. As night falls over Tel Aviv, the city's lights reflect off the Mediterranean, and the posters of the hostages seem to glow in the street lamps. The voices of people like Zvika, Elazari, Mishkin and Moran Bloom capture the mood of a nation caught between fragile optimism and persistent dread. The question that lingers is whether this time will be different, whether the promise of a hostage release will finally be fulfilled, or whether it will dissolve once again into stalemate and recrimination. For now, Israel waits. Families gather in living rooms across the country, watching the evening news for the smallest sign of progress. Activists keep vigil outside government buildings demanding action. Diplomats shuttle between capitals, searching for formulas that can satisfy both sides. And in the streets of Tel Aviv, beneath the banners and the photographs, ordinary people try to go on with their lives while carrying the weight of a conflict that has shaped their nation for generations. The voices we have heard, hopeful, skeptical, determined, reveal the human dimension behind the headlines. They remind us that beyond the rhetoric of leaders and the strategies of militants, there are parents, children, friends and neighbours whose lives depend on the success or failure of this fragile effort at peace. Whether the deal moves forward or collapses, their stories will remain at the heart of Israel's struggle to find security and closure in a region still marked by mistrust and violence.